It began as nothing more than a simple crush in the summer of 1993, while 20-year-old Crystal Harris was back home on her college break.
My plan was to go back to the college that I was attending, finish up my last year, and then start on my career. I wasn't necessarily looking to find somebody to marry, but always looking to date. What I wasn't expecting was to just fall so completely head over heels in love.
But that's exactly what happened. And it all started at the local Carlsbad, California restaurant where Crystal worked.
I was a waitress and he was a busboy, and I saw him and he was very athletic. He had a great smile, tan. He was very funny.
His name was Sean Harris, a 22-year-old college senior finishing his last year of school. Crystal was smitten.
We had been flirting all summer, and a bunch of us after work one night were going to go out. He was going, and so I was going, and we hit it off. From that moment on, I mean, we were together.
He was fun to be around. Crystal was so excited about him.
That fall, it took all Crystal had to tear herself away from her boyfriend and return to school. But after graduating with a finance degree in June 1994, Crystal moved back to Carlsbad and in with Sean.
It was a huge step in life. It was exciting.
Crystal quickly landed her dream job as a stockbroker, while Sean worked for his family's car dealership in San Diego.
He had 2 degrees, a math degree and a computer science degree, but chose not to use them and just sold cars.
In January 1996, Crystal and Sean made it official, exchanging vows in a beautiful reception hall in front of friends and family.
It seemed like any young couple in love. They just seemed to have a lot of fun with each other. She seemed really happy.
The wedding was beautiful, very romantic. I felt really happy and really satisfied.
After returning from their honeymoon, the young newlyweds decided to focus on work until they were ready to start a family. Crystal's finance career soared, while Sean seemed content selling cars. But 2 years later, in the summer of 1998, it all came to a screeching halt.
We had sold 1 car, so it necessitated me driving him to work. We had an agreed upon time to pick him up, and for several days, he was not anywhere near ready, and it was frustrating me.
One day that June, while driving Sean to work, Crystal voiced her frustrations, and an argument quickly broke out.
And he just reaches over and he hits me. It was back of his hand, and it was enough to bruise my skin. It just was shocking. I had never been hit in my life by a man.
Realizing that she needed to put space between them immediately, Crystal dropped Sean off, not a word spoken, and headed to work.
Once I got to the office, I went into business mode. So it was file a restraining order, file a police report, file for divorce, all of those things. So that's what I did. I just would never put up with being hit by my own husband.
Sean was arrested and charged with spousal battery. He moved in with his family and was court-ordered to attend a 52-week anger management program. But just a few weeks later, Crystal was surprised when Sean's father reached out to her.
His dad was telling me things like, Sean is all torn apart. He's already attending anger management classes. I remember his dad asking me, would it be okay if Sean talked to me? And I agreed.
It wasn't long before Sean called, and Crystal couldn't deny her feelings for her husband.
Sean was very remorseful. It seemed like we had a path to reconciliation through the anger management classes. I really did love him with all my heart.
But Crystal would soon realize that she had made a terrible mistake.
She was afraid of him. She was afraid of what he would do.
His eyes, which are normally like very blue, they were black. It was scary.
In the spring of 1998, a few months after Crystal Harris had her husband Sean arrested, the couple decided to give their marriage another try.
I decided to forgive Sean because I saw him making an effort to change. We had something worth fighting for.
He did say to me, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, going to anger management. And I thought, good, great. People do change.
In October 2002, 4 years after Sean's arrest, the couple welcomed a baby boy into the world. Sean eagerly left his job selling cars and became a stay-at-home dad.
Since I had a career that was built up over several years, it seemed feasible to have him be the one to stay home. And he wanted to do that.
It wasn't long before the happy couple realized they were expecting again. But in April 2005, just a month before the birth of their second child, tragedy struck. Sean's father died from cancer.
His father was the person that he cared most about on this earth, and it hit Sean hard, really hard.
Even after their second son was born, Sean was unable to truly bond with the new baby.
All he wanted to do was sleep. He played video games all night, every night, and then sleep all day. I felt like I had lost him, and we weren't a family anymore.
As the months passed, Sean became more detached and distant. Crystal was at her wit's end, even threatening Sean with divorce. But that only made Sean angry.
Our arguments would just escalate, and he was starting to say things like, really, you want to start? You want to start? You want to go at it? Let's go.
By the winter of 2006, Sean and Crystal were arguing incessantly, and the fights were turning ugly.
He grabbed a basket full of all my watches, my bracelets, and just stomped it all. He would just get destructive and terrorizing.
Then, in the summer of 2007, another fight became downright vicious.
He proceeded to start to lead me around by the back of my neck. He started to push me around. I realized that, this was getting physical and I didn't want it to. That's when he started to fill up these huge, big gulp-sized cups with water and just start throwing them all over my bedroom, all over the bed, all over me. It was horrible. It was just off the charts for no reason. I called 911 and the police came out and Sean left before they got here.
Sean was gone for several days, and when he returned home, he was cold as ice.
And he told me, I'm sick of you calling the police. I'm sick of you threatening divorce. If you do it again, I'm going to kill you. And he was dead serious. I remember being thrown into a state of shock. It was the first time in my life I felt truly powerless.
Desperate to cope with her situation, Crystal decided to do things a little differently.
I just thought, what if you're just really nice to him? How can somebody be mean to you if you're just really nice to them? I started going to church. I just reached this point where I was out of options.
On March 22, 2008, the day before Easter, Crystal invited Sean to her church with the kids for a holiday celebration. But right away, Crystal could see it was a mistake.
Because he so reluctantly came, he was a stick in the mud the whole day.
By the time they got into the car, the two were already fighting, and Sean's ugly behavior went into overdrive.
And he put his finger right here in that tender part of your throat and started pushing. And it hurt really bad, and I couldn't breathe. The boys were crying, and I was crying. I was so mad at myself for letting it get to the point where they saw something like that happen.
Crystal knew she was in a desperate situation.
I couldn't see how leaving could work long term. Even if he was arrested, I visualized him out immediately. I was trying to think about survival. How do I stay alive? I decided that my best hope would be to buy a gun. then get a restraining order. And then when he violated the restraining order, I had some protection. There's a 10-day waiting period in the state of California to get a gun. So at this point, all I could do was wait.
Crystal anxiously began counting down the days until she realized she already had one tool that could prove more powerful than a weapon.
I was like, what? I couldn't fathom that it had come to that point.
I'll be damned if this is going to happen to me and I do not have proof.
By March of 2008, Crystal Harris was so terrified of her abusive husband, Sean, that she put herself on a waiting list for a gun.
He threatened me with my life. He had hit me in front of my children. I 100% expected him to violate the restraining order, and in that case, I needed my gun. There's a 10-day waiting period, so at this point, all I could do was wait.
But the next morning, when Sean cornered Crystal once again, she devised a more effective plan.
He started with the death threat again. I just remember thinking it would be nice if I could get these death threats on tape.
Crystal found an old cassette recorder and hid it in a drawer near her bathroom. She knew it was just a matter of time before Sean accosted her again. And sure enough, the following Friday, Sean followed Crystal into their bedroom.
He said that he wanted to have sex. And I said, no, we've been fighting all week. And I'm like, the kids are right upstairs. The answer is no.
But Sean wouldn't take no for an answer. And he suddenly grabbed Crystal.
I just kept telling him no. He kept saying, this is not up for negotiation. And when I realized that nothing I said mattered, I remembered that I had that tape recorder. So I kind of thought to myself, like, I'll be damned if this is going to happen to me and I do not have proof.
Crystal begged Sean to let her use the bathroom.
Finally, after a long time, he relented. And I went and I used the bathroom. And when I came out, I opened that drawer and I hit record.
The recorder picked up everything as Sean attacked his own wife.
If I protest too much, if I yell and scream and say no, and he just choked me again and threatened me some more. He threatened to get a knife. It was horrible. I felt completely brutalized.
Afterwards, Sean threatened Crystal once again before he left the room. Crystal felt like a prisoner in her own home, terrified and helpless, but that was about to change. On April 1st, 2008, around 6 p.m., Crystal came home from work, and Sean was waiting for her.
He said, "Where have you been all day?" And I just said, "I was at work." And he's like, "Are you sure about that? Are you sure you're not lying about that?" And Sean came immediately behind me and put his hands around my neck and just started to choke me super hard. I thought I was going to die, and it was brutal and just like a real huge escalation. And his eyes, which are normally like very blue, they were black.
Sean brutally assaulted Crystal. And after it was over, Crystal realized she had to get out.
I thought, I'm going to die if I stay here one more minute. I'm not going to survive another attack by him.
Once the kids were safe in bed and Sean started playing his video games, Crystal made her move.
I grabbed my cell phone and I walked out the front door. I went into some bushes and I was hiding and I called 911.
911 emergency?
I need the police at my house. My husband killed me. Stay away from me.
Are you inside the house?
I'm outside the house. He doesn't know I'm gone.
We have dispatched police a few minutes ago. They're driving there as we're talking.
Knowing she had Sean's first attack on tape, Crystal waited for police to arrive. She hoped the worst was finally over, but she had no idea one of the most difficult battles of her life was about to begin.
It's disgusting, and it is just morally reprehensible.
This whole case was such a tragic, horrible situation.
If you have a story of marriage gone wrong and would like to appear on this series, go to investigation.discovery.com. The evening of April 1st, 2008, police with weapons drawn surrounded Crystal Harris's husband, Sean. Crystal had accused him of sexually assaulting her.
They arrested him without incident. He invoked his right to silence from the get-go.
Based on the tape and Crystal's statement, Sean was charged with forcible oral copulation, spousal rape, and sodomy. He would remain in jail while awaiting his trial. Bail was set at $250,000.
After about a year and a half in prison, his sister paid cash for his bail. That very day, I just grabbed the boys out of school and I took off for a month.
In June 2010, Crystal filed for divorce, and she had to face Sean once more, this time in family court, where she received some disturbing news. Because Crystal was the breadwinner of her family, California law dictated that she had to pay her estranged husband and accused rapist spousal support.
The only exception in the law as it existed was if your spouse had tried to kill you. You don't have to pay them spousal support. And there were no other exceptions.
The judge says instead of having to pay him $3,000 a month, which is what the regular computer numbers were, I could pay him only $1,000 a month. And that is what I have called the rape discount. Because he thought that since I was raped, I don't have to pay as much. Well, that is just morally reprehensible. You do not make a rape victim pay her own rapist.
To add insult to injury, the judge also ordered her to pay $40,000 towards Sean's legal fees.
I was horrified by the way that I was treated in the family court, and I told the judge this straight to his face.
In August 2010, Sean was brought to trial. He took the stand in his own defense.
Sean said it was all consensual. I had to cross-examine him with a straight face. On that audio tape, you can hear the anger. You can hear the threats. That wasn't acting, that was him.
On September 13th, 2010, after 2.5 days of deliberation, a jury convicted Sean of forcible oral copulation. They were hung on the remaining charges of spousal rape and sodomy.
I think that shows how tough it is to have conclusive evidence of a crime, particularly a sex crime, between spouses.
So I was relieved, but I was really angry. I don't feel like I've got justice in a way.
On January 24th, 2011, Sean was sentenced to 6 years in prison and was forced to register as a sex offender. That December, Crystal's divorce from Sean was finalized. But she wasn't done fighting. In March of 2012, Crystal took her outrage over her rape discount straight to the California state capitol, where she lobbied the legislature to change an unjust law.
The law already says if your spouse has been convicted of attempted murder or solicitation of murder, that they do not have to pay attorney's fees or alimony. And we're just broadening that existing law to include violent sexual crimes. It's not right that that should ever happen to any other woman.
Now on her own, Crystal remains focused on providing her children with a safe and loving home.
The kids and I are doing pretty good. It's not easy being a single working mom, that's for sure, but our life now is much more peaceful and we're happy.
To this day, Crystal and her family wonder why Sean turned on her like he did.
He saw my sister as a strong breadwinner for the family, and he was in this atypical role of the stay-at-home father. And I think it all just culminated of him having to assert his manliness over her in the way that he did.
I don't know what happened to him, but whatever happened to him, that's his doing. And we have to just soldier on the best way we know how, the boys and me, and do the best we can with what we have, and that's what we're going to do.
Jennifer Rinaldo always knew it took hard work to make a marriage last. But if love and affection are no longer there, sometimes all you can do is throw in the towel.
My first marriage, we got married when we were young. I was 19 years old, and things just got hectic. We grew apart, and I just didn't feel appreciated, and our marriage ended.
In early 2000, 30-year-old Jennifer was a single mom supporting herself and her 3 sons. She was just getting used to being on her own again when she spotted an intriguing stranger at her local Rhode Island shopping mall.
I was out at the mall with one of my children, and I was in line, and he was standing behind me talking about music, and he said something that interested me, so I turned around and started a conversation.
The man introduced himself as Jack Rinaldo, a music licensor from Baltimore, Maryland, who was in town for a conference. Jennifer was instantly charmed.
He seemed so smart and so sweet and so polite. It just made me want to know more about him.
Before they parted, Jack gave Jennifer his email address, and the two began a flirtatious correspondence.
We would email each other every day. We would instant message. We would talk for hours. He just seemed so interested in everything about me. He just made me feel like I was the only person in the world that mattered. Jack told me he was 39 years old. He had never been married before. He owned his own music licensing business, and he told me he made substantial amounts of money because several of his songs were in big movies, they would be on commercials, and I thought, wow, this guy is something, he's very successful.
Even though he made his money in the music business, Jack told Jennifer his true passion was baseball.
Jack told me that he played AAA baseball. He was a pitcher and was very promising, and then he was unfortunately injured and had to stop.
Despite that setback, Jack seemed like a man at the top of his game.
Our relationship developed over a period of several months. He came up for a few visits and stayed in hotels. He met my sons.
I liked that he was very easygoing. My mom liked him a lot.
It all seemed so perfect. Until one day, 4 months into their relationship, when Jennifer discovered something about Jack that left her puzzled.
One day, I went to the hotel to meet Jack. We were going to go to lunch. We went down to his rented car and got in, and he realized that he left something in the room and had to run back up. So I stayed in the car. He had left his wallet in the center console, and I just thought, I wonder if he has any pictures. So me being curious, I just happened to open the wallet, and I saw his driver's license. And I noticed that the date of birth didn't make any sense. It was 1955, and he told me his birthday was in 1961. And I thought, how odd.
Even stranger was Jack's reaction when Jennifer asked him about it.
He flew off the handle. He really got irate, and he yelled at me and said I had no business looking through his personal things. And he said it was a mistake at motor vehicles and he was going to have it fixed. I thought, wow, he's getting so upset over nothing. And then I thought, well, I did look in his wallet. That is a personal place.
Jennifer wasn't about to let a typo get in the way of her happiness, so she quickly forgot about the incident. Over the next few months, the couple's romance continued to blossom. Jack moved from Baltimore to Rhode Island, and by April 2001, Jennifer and Jack were man and wife.
Our wedding was private. We basically eloped because it was my second marriage. I didn't really want to make a big deal about it and have a big wedding. I just wanted it to be us, and he was fine with that.
Jennifer felt that Jack was her knight in shining armor, and he seemed to be blending right into the family.
It seemed Jennifer had finally found her fairy tale. But Jack was no Prince Charming, and in time his dark past would catch up with him. The evening of December 19th, 2007, Jennifer was at home preparing dinner when there was a knock at the front door. It was the police, and they were looking for Jack.
They said, we're here to arrest him. And they didn't tell me why. They said, ask him. Before I knew it, the police had cuffs on Jack, and they were leading him outside the door.
In the spring of 2001, 10 years before her husband was arrested, Jennifer Rinaldo felt lucky to have married such a hard-working man.
After Jack and I got married and he moved in, he was working from our basement office, and he would be down there from very early in the morning till late at night, on the phone, on the computer, working all the time.
Jack's music licensing business seemed to be going so well that Jennifer didn't think twice about putting his name on the deed to her house. And she was more than happy to trust her new husband with the household finances.
Jack told me that he would be paying the mortgage, he would handle all the monthly bills, that I didn't need to open up the mail, he would take care of everything. I had no reason to worry about the finances because he always had money. He always gave me money to spend.
Since money was no object, Jennifer quit her job. And for once in her life, she allowed herself to be spoiled and enjoy every minute of it. But just 3 years later, in 2004, Jack's finances took a hit.
Jack's business at that time seemed to be not doing as well. He never gave me specifics, but I think there was a point where he stopped giving me money every week. I felt like I needed to go back to work. I wanted to have my own money. I still never paid any of the bills. I was asking if he needed any help, and he would tell me everything's fine, everything's being taken care of. Don't worry about it.
Despite her husband's reassurances, Jennifer went back to work, while Jack began yearning for the good old days of his past.
Jack loved to talk about baseball. He would tell me about his pitching days and how great he was.
Jack loved playing catch with us. He loved going out to the fields and hitting us fly balls. He always talked about he wanted to play again.
So in the spring of 2006, when Jack was offered a chance to work with a local kids' baseball team, it wasn't a surprise that he jumped at the opportunity.
He would go to every single practice, and he became very good friends with the parents and the captain of the team and the manager of the team. And the kids loved him. The parents thought he was wonderful, and he just seemed to be really in his element when he was with the baseball team.
Later that year, Jack announced he'd come up with a new venture that would combine his two passions, baseball and business.
Jack wanted to have a baseball academy where he could train children. Jack indicated that there wouldn't be a big investment. I thought it was just a great way for him to get involved and to do what he loved to do because he missed it so much.
Over the next year, Jack had a ball coaching the team, and Jennifer was thrilled to see her husband so happy. Everything was going so well until November of 2007, when Jennifer got a shocking phone call straight out of left field.
The bank called me at home one day to tell me that my husband had written 2 $10,000 checks on my account. There obviously wasn't enough money in the accounts to cover the checks, so I told the bank to go ahead and stop payment on the checks. I just didn't know what was happening. I couldn't understand why he would do this.
Dumbfounded, Jennifer confronted Jack, who reluctantly admitted that all was not well with the baseball academy. Jack told her he was being pressured to pay for warehouse space that was originally promised to him free of charge.
He talked as if they were trying to run a scam on him, charging him a great deal of money. He told me he felt threatened and felt he had to write the checks because he felt like some harm would come to him if he didn't.
Confused, Jennifer tried to forgive the forged checks and move on. But she couldn't help but wonder, if Jack was capable of forgery, did he have something else up his sleeve?
Everything became suspect. And then you start replaying things in your head to try to remember if you saw something or you heard something, and it was driving me crazy.
It wouldn't be long before Jennifer found out just what her husband was up to.
I haven't seen anybody quite as crafty as Mr. Rinaldo.
I opened the mail and my jaw just dropped.
In November of 2007, Jennifer Rinaldo was trying to forgive her husband for forging her signature on 2 $10,000 checks. But just a month later, she was thrown yet another curveball.
I had come home from work one day. I started to prepare dinner. My son walked through the door and said, "Mom, the police are here. They're looking for Jack." They said, we're here to arrest him. And they didn't tell me why. They said, ask him. I was just thinking, this has to be a mistake. When Jack came upstairs, the police took him into custody. Jack told me it was a misunderstanding. It had to do with the checks, and that once he explained, it would be fine.
Jack was charged with writing bad checks and released a few hours later pending a court date to determine his punishment. Once home, Jack did his best to put Jennifer's mind at ease.
He assured me that he was going to take care of everything. It wasn't a big problem, it wasn't a big deal, and he would handle it, and for me not to worry about it. And I thought, I'm going to let him take care of this, and I'm not going to worry about it.
But the Rhode Island State Police detectives weren't so easily convinced. They decided to do some digging into Jack's past, and what they discovered was stunning.
When I ran his prints, there was actually 3 different names that were attached to those fingerprints, one being Jack Rinaldo, Jack Norris, and Jack Dorvis. They were connected to numerous arrests dating back to the early 80s in the state of Florida.
Investigators learned that Jack had a lengthy rap sheet that included petty theft, forgery, and financial scams. Detectives decided to keep a wary eye on Jack Rinaldo as they continued trying to determine who he really was. Meanwhile, back in Cumberland, Jennifer just wanted her life with Jack to get back to normal. But on February 25, 2008, things took an unfortunate turn.
I was at work and the phone rang, and my coworker answered it and said, your husband's on the phone. He said, it's an emergency. I went to the phone and it was Jack, and he said, I've been arrested. He didn't tell me why. He just very calmly told me what I needed to do and to meet him down at the state police.
Jennifer rushed to the police station. Once there, the detectives delivered a stunning blow.
The detective told me that the baseball team that he was running was a scam and that these people were angry and wanted their money back. I thought, this can't be. I don't understand what's happening, but this has to be a mistake.
The police told Jennifer they believed Jack's baseball academy was a scheme to con the players' parents out of thousands of dollars.
I just wanted to get him out of there. It was a chaotic situation. They were saying he was a criminal, and it made no sense to me.
Jack spent the night in jail, and the next day he was released on bond.
When Jack got home, he seemed very beaten. He was really upset. I wanted to know what was going on, and I needed him to explain it to me. And he basically told me that the baseball parents were unhappy. They thought they should be getting more for their money.
Jack claimed it was all a classic case of overbearing parents blaming him for their children's shortcomings.
And he said not to worry a thing about it, he would take care of it. I believed him.
Jennifer wanted to trust Jack. But on June 6, 2011, when Jack's case finally made its way before a judge, Jennifer had to admit her husband's actions didn't seem like those of an innocent man.
I have not seen anybody try that hard to get out of court proceedings. The day the trial started, Mr. Rinaldo asked the judge if he could go to the bathroom on several occasions, indicating that he had some sort of stomach virus. The second day of the trial, Mr. Rinaldo did not show up, claiming he had some heart palpitations. The judge ordered his medical records to be reviewed by the court. Those documents proved that there was, in fact, no medical issues with Mr. Rinaldo. The judge then found Mr. Rinaldo in contempt of court for providing false information to the court, and he was locked up for 6 months on a contempt charge.
There were a lot of excuses to delay the trial, and at this time I was kind of getting to the point where I had had enough of it. I thought, this just doesn't seem right.
Before long, her lingering doubts were cemented. With Jack in prison on contempt charges, Jennifer did her best to hold the family together. When she opened the mail for the first time in years, it would be strike 3 for Jack.
If someone could lie to you about basic things, what other things were they lying about?
It was all just stuff that he had made up, and I figured nothing he had ever told me was true.
In June of 2011, Jennifer Rinaldo's husband Jack was in jail, and Jennifer took over the job of managing the family's finances. It was a true wake-up call.
I got home from work, I took the mail out of the mailbox and spread it out on the counter, and all it was were bills after bills after bills. I opened them up, I found a large package from the mortgage company stating that they were foreclosing on my home in 3 weeks' time.
And that wasn't all.
I opened the water bill, the electric bill, the gas bill. They were $12,000, $8,000, $5,000. Jack had not paid the utility bills in 5 years, and I was just in awe. And I began making phone calls to find out how this happened, and I was told he was writing letters stating that someone in our home was terminally ill. That's why they hadn't shut anything off. That's why they allowed him to not pay the bills.
Jennifer was finally forced to see her husband's true colors.
I began to question everything about him, where he was from, who he was, his entire existence. If someone could lie to you about basic things like paying utility bills, what other things were they lying about?
Desperate to learn the truth, Jennifer reached out to investigators on her husband's case. She was shocked by what she learned.
The detective came to my home. We sat down and he had a folder in front of him. He started telling me just incredible things that I didn't know.
Jack Ronaldo is a habitual con man. When we looked into his background and were able to discover that he began this activity, as far as we can tell, back in the early 1980s, it seems like that's all he knows how to do, and unfortunately, he's pretty good at it.
There's so much mystery that the police still don't even know his true last name. They don't know his true date of birth. They don't know his social security number. He just has no identity, really. Nobody knows who he is.
The detective told Jennifer that in 1983, Jack had been in trouble in Florida for petty theft. He moved to Maryland, where in 1999, he landed in hot water for running his first fake baseball academy. When Jack landed in Rhode Island, he was up to his old antics again. Jack had come up with a plot to scam the families of young baseball players out of more than $60,000. And detectives were now certain they knew how he had done it.
Mr. Ronaldo presented the fact that he was a former professional baseball player for the Baltimore Orioles and that he still had affiliation with the team. The parents had to pay a $3,000 fee to join this team. And what Mr. Ronaldo explained to the parents was that this fee would be matched by the Baltimore Orioles throughout the season.
Jack had also convinced one of the parents to loan him another $30,000 to help with the team's startup costs.
The money itself never went towards anything towards the team. We were able to determine that he used the money for his own personal gain.
When I found out the baseball academy was a scam, I was just really disappointed. I thought, he took advantage of not only the families, but the children as well. They had big dreams, and I felt terrible for them because they had big hopes and they were crushed.
With so many strikes against him, Jennifer decided it was time for Jack to be benched for good.
At that point, I did rethink everything that happened. Every word he said to me, every time he spoke of his family, his friends as a child, I thought, are these people real? Is anyone real? I was more curious to know what was actually true and what wasn't, but I knew I would never get the answers. So I cut off all communications. I filed for divorce.
On December 6, 2011, Jack Ronaldo pleaded no contest to the charges of obtaining money under false pretenses, fraudulent checks, and filing false documents. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, followed by 12.5 years of probation. He must pay restitution to the victims of his scam.
Mr. Ronaldo has the ability to make people believe that everything he says is true and accurate. I believe there could be other victims out there from similar type fraud cases that we're unaware of at this time.
Today, Jennifer Ronaldo is back to being a single mother.
We moved into an apartment into a less expensive town in a less desirable area. I had to pick up a second job. My credit after all of this is beyond bad. I'll likely have to file bankruptcy to start over again.
The support from her family and her 3 sons have given her the strength to stay positive and keep moving forward.
Jennifer is doing well. She's a go-getter. She's got a lot of spunk on her. I do not worry about my daughter at all.
We're very strong people. We stick together, and I have wonderful children who are pretty close to being adults now, so they understand and they're very aware of everything and they don't ask for anything. We'll make it. I know we will.
It begins with a sound that doesn't belong where it is, a sound that cuts across the early hours like a blade dragged across glass. The echo of a phone ringing in an empty kitchen, unanswered, relentless, while rain needles the windows and the city holds its breath. Because in a narrow terraced house on a quiet street in London, something has already gone wrong, something irreversible, something that will refuse to stay buried for decades. The night presses close. Street lamps flicker, casting pale halos on wet pavement. A bus sighs past, empty, late, indifferent. Inside the house, the clock keeps time for no one, ticking toward morning, while a woman who should have been home by now is not, and the absence grows heavier by the minute, thick enough to taste. This is how it starts. Not with a scream, not with sirens, but with silence, the kind that creeps into rooms and rearranges lives without asking permission. Her name will soon be everywhere, printed in block letters beneath grainy photographs, spoken by strangers who never met her but feel as if they did. For now, she is just missing. 34 years old, reliable, known routines, a job that kept her late sometimes, a commute she could walk with her eyes closed, a neighborhood that prided itself on being safe. Friends will say later that nothing felt off when they last saw her, that she laughed, that she promised to call, that she had plans for the weekend. The details will stack up, ordinary and precise, as if order itself could keep the chaos at bay. By dawn, the word missing has already begun to shift, to darken at the edges. The first officer steps through the front door with a practiced calm, noting the untouched coat, the keys on the hook, the handbag left behind. These are small things, but they speak loudly. The air smells faintly of detergent and old paper. No sign of a struggle, no sign of haste, just the quiet insistence of a life interrupted mid-sentence. Outside, the street is waking. Curtains twitch. A woman walks her dog past the police tape that hasn't been put up yet, pausing, curious, uneasy. Someone whispers the word cold case, far too early, as if naming the fear might make it manageable. But it is too soon for labels. It is too soon for conclusions. It is only the beginning of a long, grinding uncertainty that will seep into the bones of a community and stay there. The first hours move quickly, then slow to a crawl. Detectives canvass the area, knocking on doors, asking the same questions in the same neutral tone. Did you see anything? Did you hear anything? A raised voice. A car idling too long. Most answers are no. A few are maybes. One neighbor mentions footsteps at an odd hour. Another recalls a van parked where it didn't belong. These fragments are gathered carefully, bagged and tagged like physical evidence. But they are slippery, resistant to shape. The city offers up its usual distractions. Traffic roars. Trains rattle overhead. Somewhere, a radio announces the weather. The world refuses to pause, even as a family's private nightmare unfolds behind closed doors. Her parents arrive mid-morning, faces drawn, hands shaking, eyes darting to every corner as if she might suddenly appear. They repeat her name like a prayer. The officers listen, nodding, taking notes, their expressions carefully unreadable. By day 2, posters appear on lampposts and shop windows. A familiar smile stares back at passers-by, asking them to look, to remember, to help. Phone lines open. Tips trickle in, then surge, then thin out again. A sighting near a tube station. A woman who looks like her crossing a bridge. Each lead ignites hope, then snuffs it out, leaving behind a residue of exhaustion. The investigation widens. CCTV footage is pulled, hours of black and white graininess watched frame by frame. Faces blur past, anonymous and unknowable. The technology of the time is limited, the angles unforgiving. A coat that might be hers. A figure that could be anyone. Nothing holds long enough to become proof. Weeks pass. The word murder is not spoken publicly, but it hovers in the background, an uninvited guest no one can quite bring themselves to acknowledge. Detectives grow quieter. Their notebooks thicken. The press grows louder. Headlines sharpen, speculating, demanding answers, pushing the story into living rooms and onto breakfast tables. A mysterious disappearance. A community in shock. A cold case in the making. Then the discovery comes, abrupt and brutal in its finality. A call from a location no one wanted to hear about. A stretch of neglected ground on the city's edge, overlooked, anonymous. The details are sparse, controlled, released in careful increments, but the effect is immediate and devastating. The missing woman is missing no longer. The question changes shape, hardening into something far more dangerous. Who did this? And how did they vanish into the city without a trace? The scene yields little comfort. Time has been unkind. Evidence is compromised, degraded by weather and neglect. What remains is collected with meticulous care, each fiber, each trace treated as precious. There is anger now, sharp and focused, fueling long hours and relentless questioning. But anger does not replace answers. Suspects surface, then fade. A former acquaintance with a temper. A coworker who lingered too long after shifts. A stranger glimpsed once, never again. Each is examined, eliminated, filed away. Alibis hold. Forensics stall. The case begins to cool, the heat of urgency replaced by the dull ache of unfinished business. Years slide by. The file grows thicker, heavier, its weight felt in every meeting where the case is raised and then set aside again. New detectives read old notes, tracing the same paths, asking the same questions, hoping for a different outcome. The city changes around them. Shops close. New buildings rise. The street where it all began looks different now, but the memory lingers, stubborn and unresolved. For the family, time does not heal. It stretches, distorts, marking anniversaries with a pain that refuses to dull. Birthdays pass uncelebrated. Holidays are endured rather than enjoyed. They speak to the media when asked, voices steady, eyes haunted, repeating the same plea. Someone knows something. Someone always does. The phrase cold case settles in, heavy and clinical, but the cold is deceptive. Beneath it, embers still glow. Evidence waits in storage, silent but patient. Technology advances. Techniques improve. What once whispered too softly to be heard may yet find its voice. And so the case sleeps, not dead, just dormant, tucked away in archives and memories, while the city carries on, unaware that the past is watching, waiting for the moment when chance, persistence, and a single overlooked detail will collide. The rain keeps falling. The phone keeps ringing in empty rooms. Somewhere, the truth is closer than anyone realizes, and when it finally surfaces, it will not arrive gently. The case does not end with burial and paperwork. It mutates, stretching into corridors of time where dust gathers and questions refuse to settle. And every few months someone pulls the file from the shelf, flips it open, and feels the same chill crawl up their spine because the pages do not read like history, they read like a challenge. The evidence room smells of cardboard and metal, shelves stacked with boxes labeled in careful handwriting, dates underlined twice, and somewhere among them sits a bag sealed years ago, contents logged, preserved, waiting for a future that did not exist yet. Detectives change. Faces age. Promotions come and go. But the facts remain stubbornly the same. A woman who vanished on a routine night. A body found too late to answer the most important questions. No witnesses who could put a name to a face. No weapon that told a clear story. Just fragments, inert and frustrating, like pieces from different puzzles forced into the same frame. In the months after the discovery, the investigation surges again, driven by outrage and the uncomfortable pressure of public attention. Officers retrace her final movements, mapping them on wall-sized boards with red string and thumbtacks. The route she walked, the bus she sometimes took but didn't that night, the shortcut she favored when it rained. Each choice is examined as if it might contain motive, opportunity, confession. Her workplace becomes a focal point. Desks are searched, emails printed and reread. Colleagues sit under fluorescent lights, hands clasped, voices measured as they recount harmless interactions now reinterpreted through a darker lens. Someone remembers an argument over nothing. Someone else mentions a man who waited too long in the lobby. These details feel important in the moment, heavy with implication, but they dissolve under scrutiny, leaving behind only fatigue. The neighborhood is not spared. Officers walk the streets again, years later, asking residents to remember a night that has blurred into countless others. Some doors open reluctantly. Some never open at all. A few neighbors have moved away, their knowledge gone with them. Others offer half-remembered impressions, the kind shaped by headlines rather than memory. The city's noise has swallowed the echoes of that night. A suspect emerges briefly, flashing bright enough to ignite hope. He fits the profile, loosely. He had access, maybe. A history that makes people uneasy. He is questioned, then questioned again. His alibi is thin, but it holds. Forensics do not cooperate. The suspicion drains away, leaving behind the familiar hollow. Another name added to the list of maybes. The press moves on, eventually drawn to fresher tragedies. Headlines shrink, then disappear. The family notices the silence first. Call slow. Cameras vanish. The posters fade, then peel away from lampposts, their edges curling like old wounds. The case slips quietly into a new category, spoken aloud less often but thought about more intensely. Unsolved. Years pass. Technology accelerates beyond what anyone imagined at the time. DNA databases grow. Software sharpens images that once seemed hopelessly blurred. Cold cases across the country are reopened, cracked open like time capsules, their secrets exposed by tools that didn't exist when the crimes were committed. Each success sends a ripple through police departments, a reminder that waiting is not the same as forgetting. Inside a quiet office, a detective nearing retirement rereads the file, slower now, more deliberate. Patterns emerge that were invisible before, not because the facts have changed, but because perspective has. A timeline adjusted by minutes rather than hours. A witness statement reinterpreted without the pressure of immediate resolution. A small inconsistency that once seemed irrelevant now refuses to be ignored. The evidence room yields its treasures reluctantly. Boxes are opened. Seals checked. Logs verified. The bag is there, exactly where it should be. The material inside has survived, patient and mute. It is sent away, handled by gloved hands, placed into machines that hum softly, translating biological whispers into data points. This is not a dramatic moment. There are no sirens, no raised voices. Just a quiet hope that something, anything, might speak at last. While the lab works, the city continues its indifferent rhythm. New generations walk the same streets, unaware of the history beneath their feet. Cafes occupy spaces that once held newsagents displaying grim headlines. The past is layered under the present, invisible unless you know where to look. When the call finally comes, it is understated, professional, but the words carry weight. A partial profile, not enough to name a suspect, but enough to confirm that something usable exists. The case stirs. Meetings are scheduled. Old notes are pulled back into the light. A plan takes shape, cautious but determined. The family is informed, carefully, gently. They have learned to manage hope, to hold it at arm's length, but even so, it flares. They listen, nodding, asking few questions. They have heard variations of this before. Still, the possibility settles into their lives, changing the way they sleep, the way they wake. Investigators expand their reach, comparing data against databases that span regions and years. Hits come back negative at first, then another round. Still nothing. The frustration returns, sharper now, because the door is opened just enough to glimpse what might be beyond it. A decision is made to revisit witnesses who were dismissed too quickly, not because they lied, but because the questions asked of them were incomplete. Time has changed them too. Some remember more now, unburdened by fear or loyalty. Others remember less, their memories eroded by repetition and doubt. One man hesitates before speaking, his eyes fixed on a point just beyond the detective's shoulder, as if watching the past play out again. He mentions a detail he never shared before, not because it was secret, but because no one asked the right question. A car parked oddly, a face half lit by a street lamp. At the time, it felt insignificant. Now it feels dangerous. The description is vague, but it aligns with something in the file, a note scribbled years ago and then forgotten. The pieces begin to edge closer, not snapping into place yet, but no longer drifting apart. The case exhales, slowly, as if waking from a long sleep. There is still no name, no arrest, no headline to reclaim public attention. Just movement. Quiet, deliberate movement toward a truth that has waited long enough. Momentum changes the texture of a case. It sharpens the air in the room, straightens backs, shortens sentences. What was once a stack of paper becomes a living thing again, restless, demanding attention. The detectives feel it before they can articulate it. That subtle shift when coincidence begins to look like pattern, when the past stops resisting and starts answering back in fragments. They redraw the timeline, not broadly but precisely, shaving minutes, questioning assumptions that once felt solid. The night she vanished is reconstructed with almost obsessive care. The last confirmed sighting, the timestamp on a receipt, the bus that passed but did not stop. Each element is tested against the others, stress-tested until the weak points show. The witness who mentioned the oddly parked car becomes a focal point. His statement is read and reread, cross-checked against weather reports, traffic flow, streetlight maintenance logs. At the time, the street lamp near his house had been malfunctioning, flickering unpredictably. That matters now. A face half-lit is not nothing. It is a clue distorted by circumstance. Old CCTV footage is digitized again, run through newer enhancement software. The images do not become clear, not in the way television dramas promise, but shapes separate from shadows, movement from stillness. A vehicle appears at the edge of one frame, its presence brief but deliberate. It lingers where it shouldn't, then slips away. The car is unremarkable. That, too, matters. No flashy color, no distinctive markings. The kind of vehicle designed to disappear into traffic. Registration plates are unreadable, but the model narrows the field. Records are pulled, lists generated. Thousands of possibilities collapse into hundreds, then dozens. Parallel to this, the forensic work continues, patient and exacting. The partial DNA profile is expanded, refined. Each update feels incremental, almost disappointing, until it isn't. A comparison returns a familial hit, not a name, but a direction. Someone related to the unknown contributor has crossed paths with the system before. The room goes quiet when the result comes in. This is the sound of a case changing shape. Genealogical work begins, slow and meticulous. Family trees sprawl across screens, branches splitting and reconnecting, names surfacing from decades past. It is a method that did not exist when the crime occurred, a bridge between eras, between mistakes made long ago and consequences deferred. Investigators cross-reference the emerging family lines with the vehicle records. Patterns overlap. A name appears twice, then 3 times, in different contexts. It is not proof. It is not even suspicion yet, but it is enough to pull a thread. They look into him quietly. No announcements. No leaks. Just files requested, addresses checked, employment histories reconstructed. In 2001, he lived within a reasonable distance. He owned a car matching the model. He changed jobs abruptly not long after the disappearance. Each fact alone is harmless. Together, they begin to lean in the same direction. Interviews are planned carefully. This is not a man to be startled into confession. He is older now, settled, woven into a life that does not include sirens or interrogation rooms. He has neighbors who wave, a routine, a sense of having outrun whatever shadows once followed him. The first contact is casual, almost friendly. Questions about the past, framed broadly. Where were you working back then? Did you live in the area? He answers easily, too easily perhaps, his memory selective in ways that draw attention without revealing intent. When asked about the night in question, his timeline shifts slightly between retellings. Minutes slide. Details blur. Nothing explosive happens. No handcuffs click shut. The interview ends politely. But the detectives leave with the same feeling they've learned to trust over years of work. The sense that they are standing at the edge of something deep, something that will not yield without pressure applied from multiple sides. They apply it methodically. Surveillance, discreet and legal. Records requests. Old associates contacted under the guise of routine follow-up. One former co-worker recalls a sudden, unexplained absence in the weeks after the disappearance. Another remembers a car that came back with a dent that hadn't been there before. Small things, accumulating. The family is kept informed in broad strokes, enough to prepare them without promising what cannot yet be delivered. They have learned the language of caution, the careful phrasing that protects against disappointment. Still, the possibility hums beneath every conversation. As the net tightens, the suspect becomes aware of scrutiny. His demeanor changes. He calls a lawyer for an unrelated matter. He asks questions about why old records are being requested. These reactions are noted, not as guilt, but as data. Forensics returns again, this time with something closer to certainty. The DNA profile now aligns strongly with the suspect's family line. It is not a match yet, but it points insistently toward him. A warrant is sought, justified, granted. A sample is collected, unceremoniously, without drama. Waiting resumes, the familiar limbo where everything hinges on processes invisible to the naked eye. The detectives occupy themselves with preparation, rehearsing scenarios, reviewing interview strategies. If the result comes back negative, they will pivot without hesitation. If it comes back positive, the weight of years will come down all at once. The lab calls on a gray afternoon, the kind of day that seems designed to absorb news without reacting. The match is not complete, but it is close enough to remove doubt. The probability numbers climb into territory that leaves little room for coincidence. The room holds its breath. A second interview is scheduled, this time formal, recorded, conducted in a room designed to keep emotions contained. The suspect sits across from the detectives, older now than in any photograph they have, his face lined by time rather than fear. He listens as the evidence is laid out, piece by piece, a mosaic assembled carefully in front of him. He denies nothing outright, but he does not admit anything either. His answers are measured, his eyes watchful. When confronted with the DNA evidence, he pauses longer than before. Silence stretches. This is not confession, but it is not indifference. The interview ends again without resolution. But this time, something fundamental has shifted. The case is no longer asking who. It is asking how much more is needed. The path forward is clear, even if the destination remains just out of reach. The past has stopped whispering. It has started to speak, and it will not be quieted now. Pressure changes people in subtle ways first. It alters posture, tightens voices, rearranges routines. The suspect returns to his life carrying an invisible weight, aware now that the past is no longer safely behind him, that it has reached forward with patient hands. Detectives feel the same pressure from the opposite direction, the sense that every move must be exact, that haste could fracture a case held together by years of restraint. They go back to the beginning again, but this time with sharper tools and a narrower focus. The night is reconstructed not as a mystery, but as a sequence. Who crossed paths with whom? Which doors were open? Which lights were on? Which sounds could have carried far enough to be heard? The suspect's movements are plotted alongside the victims, not intersecting yet, but close enough to make coincidence uncomfortable. Financial records surface, old statements pulled from archives and translated into patterns. A cash withdrawal at an unusual hour. A purchase that places him closer to the route she took than he claimed. It is circumstantial, fragile, but it aligns with the emerging picture. Investigators do not announce discoveries like this. They catalog them, stacking weight on one side of a scale that has not yet tipped. A former partner is located after weeks of searching, living quietly under a different name. She is hesitant at first, guarded, accustomed to keeping the past sealed. When she finally speaks, her words come haltingly, as if each one must be pried loose. She describes mood swings around that time, unexplained agitation, nights when he came home late and said nothing. She mentions scratches on his hands, dismissed as work-related injuries. At the time, she believed him. Now, she is no longer sure. Her statement is taken carefully, respectfully. No theatrics, no pressure, just space for memory to surface in its own time. It is not decisive, but it fills gaps, adds texture to a silhouette that has been forming slowly in the investigators' minds. They revisit the recovery site, not physically but conceptually, layering new understanding over old photographs and reports. What once seemed random now suggests placement rather than abandonment. The timing aligns with the suspect's known schedule. The geography fits his familiarity with the area. The crime begins to look less like chaos and more like intention. Publicly, nothing changes. The case remains officially unresolved, its status unchanged. Privately, preparations accelerate. Prosecutors are brought in early, their questions blunt and unforgiving. What can you prove? What can you infer? What will survive cross-examination? Every answer must be supported, every leap bridged by evidence sturdy enough to bear weight. The detectives rehearse the story as it would be told in court, not for drama, but for clarity. They strip it of emotion, reduce it to actions and consequences. Even so, the emotional undercurrent persists, a reminder of why precision matters. This is not about headlines. It is about truth that has waited too long. Another interview is scheduled, this one under a different pretext. The suspect arrives guarded but compliant, his lawyer nearby, the atmosphere thick with unspoken stakes. He is asked about the cash withdrawal. He offers an explanation that is plausible but unsupported. He is asked about the vehicle. He hesitates, then answers, his words chosen carefully, as if stepping through a field of unseen hazards. When the detectives mention the former partner's account, something flickers across his face, quickly suppressed. He leans back, crosses his arms, recalibrates. This is a man accustomed to control, to managing impressions. The interview stretches on, circling the same points from different angles, testing consistency. Minor contradictions emerge, small enough to dismiss individually, significant in aggregate. Outside the room, time passes differently. Every pause feels extended. Every glance at the clock feels like a judgment. The family waits at home, phones nearby, living in a suspended state they know too well. They have learned not to ask for updates, not because they don't want them, but because wanting too much invites disappointment. Forensics delivers another update, incremental but meaningful. Trace evidence once considered inconclusive now aligns with a material associated with the suspect's work environment. It is not exclusive, but it narrows the field further. The scale tilts another fraction. A decision looms. The threshold for arrest is high, as it should be. Investigators debate late into the night, voices low, arguments precise. Some urge patience, more corroboration. Others argue that waiting risks contamination, flight, interference. The balance between caution and action is delicate, and it defines careers as much as cases. They choose a path that honors both. Surveillance intensifies. A final sweep of records uncovers a discrepancy in his timeline that cannot be reconciled with independent data. It is the kind of detail that does not announce itself, but once seen, cannot be unseen. The arrest, when it comes, is understated. No dawn raid. No spectacle. He is taken into custody quietly, informed of the reason, his reaction controlled, almost resigned. Neighbors watch from behind curtains, unaware of the significance, sensing only that something unusual is unfolding on an otherwise ordinary day. At the station, the formalities proceed with practiced efficiency. Rights are read. Paperwork completed. The weight of the moment settles slowly, like dust after a long disturbance. Detectives who have lived with this case for years feel a strange combination of relief and apprehension. Arrest is not resolution. It is a doorway, not an ending. The interrogation room becomes the center of gravity. The suspect sits alone for a time, the silence doing its work. When the detectives enter, they bring the case with them, not as accusation, but as narrative. They lay it out methodically, piece by piece, allowing the structure to reveal itself. He listens. He corrects small details. He challenges assumptions. He maintains distance. But the effort shows. This is no longer a conversation about hypotheticals. It is a confrontation with a past that refuses to remain abstract. Hours pass. Breaks are taken. Water is offered. The rhythm is deliberate, designed to exhaust resistance without coercion. When the DNA evidence is presented again, contextualized now within the broader framework, the room shifts. Probability becomes inevitability. He does not confess. Not yet. But his denials grow narrower, his explanations more brittle. He begins to ask questions instead of answering them. What happens next? How strong is the case? These are not the questions of a man confident in his innocence. They are the questions of someone calculating outcomes. The family is informed of the arrest in person. The words land heavily, reverberating through years of waiting. There are tears, but they are not celebratory. They are release, tinged with grief, with the understanding that justice, even when delayed, does not restore what was taken. Outside, the city remains largely unaware. Traffic moves. Shops close. Life continues. But within a small circle of people bound by this case, the air feels different. The cold case is no longer cold. It is burning again, demanding to be finished, and the final answers are closer now than they have ever been, even as the truth itself resists one last time, coiled and dangerous, waiting to be drawn fully into the light. The hours after the arrest stretch and compress at the same time, a strange elastic period where nothing feels settled even though everything has changed. Paperwork stacks up. Phones ring in hushed corridors. The suspect is processed, fingerprinted, photographed, each administrative step a quiet affirmation that the past has finally collided with the present. Yet no one celebrates. The weight of what comes next presses too hard for that. In a separate room, detectives gather around a table scarred by years of similar moments. Coffee goes untouched. Notes are spread out again, not because they are needed, but because revisiting them has become instinct, a ritual born of long frustration. They speak carefully now, aware that every word could echo later in court, in headlines, in memory. The suspect requests his lawyer. The rhythm shifts immediately. Questioning pauses. Silence settles back in, thick and deliberate. He sits alone again, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, hands folded, posture composed. This is a man who understands control, who has lived with a secret long enough to convince himself it was manageable. Now, the margins are closing. Outside the station, reporters begin to sense movement. A police vehicle parked too long. A familiar face entering through a side door. Whispers spread, cautious but eager. The phrase "cold case" reappears, sharpened by the possibility of resolution. Editors prepare drafts that hedge their bets, waiting for confirmation before committing ink to paper. Inside, prosecutors step in, their presence altering the tone. Where detectives seek truth, prosecutors seek survivability. What will hold? What will fracture under scrutiny? They challenge assumptions, probe weaknesses, force uncomfortable acknowledgments. This is not adversarial. It is necessary. A case this old cannot afford romanticism. They review the DNA evidence again, numbers climbing off the page, probabilities expressed in language both precise and abstract. Near certainty is not absolute certainty. It must be paired with context, with motive, with opportunity. The story must be complete enough to withstand the defense's inevitable attempts to dismantle it piece by piece. A decision is made to push further, to attempt one more interview while the suspect remains in custody, before strategies harden and positions calcify. He agrees, advised by counsel, calculating perhaps that engagement offers more control than silence. The room fills again, the same neutral walls, the same table, the same recording light blinking steadily. The detectives shift tactics, not pressing for confession, but for narrative. They invite him to talk about his life in 2001, about stress, about routine, about things that felt unremarkable at the time. He speaks in measured tones, offering details selectively, framing himself as ordinary, overwhelmed, forgettable. It is a careful construction, designed to normalize rather than explain. They introduce inconsistencies gently, one at a time, allowing them to accumulate. The cash withdrawal, the car, the timeline that refuses to align. He responds with explanations that sound rehearsed, polished by years of private repetition. Each answer lands, then settles uncomfortably against the others. When the detectives describe the victim's final movements, they watch his face closely, not for drama, but for recognition. There is a moment, brief and subtle, where his gaze sharpens, as if correcting an internal map. It passes quickly, but it is noted. They speak about the recovery site, about placement, about familiarity with the area. He challenges the inference, points out how many people could know such places. He is right. The city is full of those who know how to disappear within it. But the argument sounds thinner now, stretched across too many coincidences. The interview ends without confession again, but it does not end empty-handed. His words, his pauses, his corrections, all become data. The recording is logged, flagged, prepared for transcription. Every syllable is potential evidence now. As night falls, the family sits together in a living room lit too brightly, the television off, phones face down on the table. They talk quietly about mundane things, anything to keep from circling the same thoughts. When the call finally comes, it is not to announce closure, only progress. Charges are being prepared. The case is moving forward. It is enough to make the air feel lighter, even as grief remains unchanged. By morning, the news breaks. Carefully worded statements. No sensational claims. Just confirmation that an arrest has been made in a long unsolved case. The headlines spread quickly, carrying the familiar language of shock and relief. Cold case reopened. Suspect in custody. The community reacts in waves, disbelief giving way to cautious hope. Neighbors speak to cameras, surprised, unsettled. He seemed normal. He kept to himself. He waved back. These statements pile up, not as defense, but as reminder of how easily the extraordinary hides within the ordinary. Behind the scenes, the prosecution builds its case methodically. Charges are filed. Dates are set. Evidence is organized into narratives designed for 12 strangers who will one day be asked to decide truth. The passage of time complicates everything. Memories fade. Records degrade. But the core remains intact, reinforced now by science that did not exist when the crime occurred. The suspect is formally charged. The words are spoken aloud in a courtroom that feels too small for the history it contains. He stands, listens, responds when prompted. There is no visible collapse, no outburst. Control remains his chosen armor. As he is led away, the weight of decades settles unevenly across those present. For the detectives, there is validation tempered by the knowledge that conviction is not guaranteed. For the family, there is movement without closure, progress without peace. For the community, there is a sudden awareness that the past can resurface without warning, reshaping the present. The case, once frozen, is now alive, its final chapters unwritten but imminent. The cold has lifted, replaced by a tense, expectant heat. Somewhere between evidence and memory, between science and silence, the truth is being forced into the open, and whatever remains hidden will not stay that way much longer. The court calendar dictates the pace now, not instinct, not urgency, not the raw pull of unfinished business. And that shift is jarring for everyone involved because the case is spent so long moving only when someone forced it to move. Dates are penciled in, then circled, then postponed. Motions are filed. Language hardens. What was once a search for answers becomes a contest over certainty. The suspect sits in a holding cell during these early hearings, absorbing the rhythm of confinement, the echoing footsteps, the controlled voices. This is not unfamiliar territory for the system, but it is new for him. His life compresses into scheduled moments. Meals passed through slots, brief conversations with counsel, hours alone with thoughts that have had decades to rehearse their defenses. The prosecution's strategy tightens. They know time is their greatest adversary. Witnesses are older now, their recollections vulnerable to doubt, to erosion. Each one is prepped carefully, not coached, but steadied, reminded of what they know and what they don't. Precision matters. Confidence matters more. The former partner agrees to testify. The decision costs her sleep. She revisits years she thought were sealed away, memories that now rearrange themselves under the harsh light of relevance. She worries about credibility, about being accused of hindsight, of bitterness, of fabrication. The prosecutors listen, reassure, explain. Her role is not to prove guilt, but to add context, to illuminate behavior that once passed unnoticed. Forensics becomes the spine of the case. Experts prepare reports dense with numbers and probabilities, language designed to be exact rather than persuasive. They anticipate challenges, rehearse explanations, refine metaphors that translate science into understanding without sacrificing accuracy. DNA does not speak in absolutes. It speaks in likelihoods so overwhelming they border on inevitability. The defense prepares its counterweight. Alternate explanations. Contamination theories. The unreliability of memory. The dangers of retroactive interpretation. They frame the investigation as a product of modern bias imposed on an old crime, warn against the seduction of technological certainty. It is their job to raise doubt, and they do it well. Media attention intensifies as the trial approaches. Documentaries are proposed. Old articles are resurfaced. The victim's name trends briefly, attached now to words like breakthrough and justice delayed. The family navigates this exposure carefully, granting limited statements, guarding what remains private. Their grief has been public enough already. Inside the courtroom, the first days are procedural, but tension coils beneath the formalities. Jurors are selected, each one screened for bias, for exposure, for emotional resilience. They sit unaware of the weight they are about to carry, ordinary people about to be entrusted with extraordinary responsibility. Opening statements arrive without drama, by design. The prosecution outlines a path, not a spectacle, promising to show how evidence old and new converges on a single conclusion. The defense urges caution, reminding jurors that time distorts truth, that suspicion is not proof. The lines are drawn cleanly, deliberately. Witnesses take the stand one by one. The neighbor who noticed the car. The co-worker who recalled the argument. Their voices shake slightly, not from fear, but from the awareness that memory is fragile and scrutiny unforgiving. Each testimony adds a layer, thin but cumulative, building a picture that is not vivid yet, but coherent. The former partner testifies quietly, eyes fixed ahead. She speaks of tension, of unexplained absences, of details that seemed trivial then and ominous now. The defense presses her hard, suggesting reinterpretation, emotional influence. She holds, not perfectly, but honestly. Her uncertainty becomes its own credibility. Then the forensic experts take the stand. Charts appear. Numbers are spoken carefully, repeatedly. The DNA evidence is explained again and again, from different angles, until even those resistant to it begin to understand its weight. The probability figures hang in the air, abstract but oppressive, difficult to dismiss without effort. The suspect watches throughout, expression controlled, occasionally conferring with counsel. When the vehicle evidence is presented, his jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. When the timeline is laid out, narrowed and cross-referenced, his gaze drops to the table. These are small reactions, meaningless in isolation, devastating in accumulation. Cross-examination attempts to fracture the narrative. Could the DNA belong to someone else in the family? Could contamination have occurred? Could witnesses be mistaken after so many years? The experts respond calmly, conceding limits while reinforcing conclusions. Doubt is acknowledged, then constrained. As days turn into weeks, the atmosphere thickens. Jurors grow quieter, more focused. They take notes less frantically now, listening for connections rather than surprises. The story is no longer shocking. It is persuasive, steady, relentless. Closing arguments arrive with a strange stillness. The prosecution does not raise its voice. It doesn't need to. It walks the jury through the evidence one final time, inviting them to see the pattern that has emerged despite time's attempts to erase it. The defense warns again of overconfidence, of the danger of mistaking probability for truth. Deliberation begins. The waiting resumes, familiar but different now. Detectives sit together in silence, replaying testimony, wondering which detail will matter most. The family waits in a small room, hands clasped, breath shallow. Years have led to this pause, this suspended moment where everything could tip in either direction. When the jury returns, the room feels smaller, airless. The foreperson stands. The verdict is read, measured and final. Guilty. The word lands with a dull thud rather than an explosion. There is no cheer, no collapse. Just a collective exhale, followed by tears that arrive late, carrying decades with them. The suspect absorbs the verdict in silence, his composure finally cracking at the edges. The mask slips just enough to reveal something raw beneath. Regret, calculation, resignation. It is impossible to tell. He is led away, the future narrowing to a series of fixed points he can no longer control. Outside the courtroom, cameras wait, hungry for emotion. The family steps past them, faces composed, voices steady when they speak. Justice has come, they say, but it has taken too long. The past cannot be undone, only acknowledged. The cold case is closed in the system, stamped and archived, its status changed at last. But closure is an administrative term. For those who lived inside the case, it is something else entirely. It is the quiet realization that the truth, once uncovered, does not erase the years it spent hidden. It only explains them. Sentencing does not arrive with thunder. It arrives with paperwork, with measured language, with a judge's voice steady enough to make the outcome feel almost ordinary. And that ordinariness is unsettling because nothing about the journey here has been ordinary at all. The courtroom listens as the years are counted not in calendar pages, but in impact statements, in timelines recited again, in the careful arithmetic of harm. The victim's family stands when invited to speak. Their words are not rehearsed for performance. They do not accuse so much as remember. They talk about a life interrupted, about plans that never happened, about rooms that stayed the same while the world moved on. They speak of birthdays marked quietly, of hope rationed carefully, of the way time stretched thin and then snapped. The room absorbs every syllable. Even the suspect looks down. The judge responds with restraint. Accountability is named. The gravity of delay is acknowledged. The sentence is imposed within the boundaries of law, heavy enough to matter, finite enough to feel inadequate. It closes one door and opens another that leads only forward. There is no dramatic reaction. The gavel does not slam. The consequences settle slowly, like dust after a long disturbance. Outside, the city receives the news in fragments. Headlines flash. Notifications buzz. A cold case, cracked at last. A killer identified through new evidence. People skim, nod, move on. The story is consumed, summarized, shelved. For those who lived it, that compression feels almost violent, but it is also inevitable. The world cannot carry this weight forever. Detectives return to their desks. Some feel lighter. Others feel hollow. A case that defined years of their working lives now occupies a final line in a database. Its status changed from open to closed. They know better than anyone that closed does not mean finished. It means contained. It means no longer chasing. It means living with what remains. They debrief, formally and informally, examining choices, timelines, mistakes made and avoided. What worked? What didn't? What could be done differently next time? The lessons are practical, unromantic, valuable. They talk about patience, about humility, about the danger of certainty and the necessity of persistence. They talk about technology, about how evidence can wait longer than people can. The forensic experts return to their labs, their work complete, but their thoughts lingering. They know the limits of their science, the way numbers can be misunderstood, the way certainty must be communicated without arrogance. They also know that this case will be cited, referenced, taught. A reminder that time does not destroy evidence so much as it demands better questions. The former partner withdraws again into anonymity, relieved and burdened at once. Speaking helped, but it also reopened doors she had closed for survival. She avoids the news now, avoids discussions, avoids the temptation to reframe her past endlessly. She wants to live in the present, finally allowed to stop wondering what her instincts tried to tell her years ago. For the family, the days after sentencing are strangely quiet. The adrenaline fades. The routine resumes. They return to houses filled with memories that no verdict can rearrange. There is comfort in knowing the truth, in having it named aloud, but it does not replace what was lost. It sits beside the grief rather than erasing it. They sort through old boxes, photographs kept for decades without context, now reinterpreted through a different lens. Laughter frozen in time looks sharper now, more fragile. They decide what to keep, what to store away, what to let go. These decisions feel ceremonial, as if order might emerge from intention. The neighborhood where it began barely notices the passing of justice. New tenants occupy old rooms. New routines overlay old ones. The street lamp has been replaced. The corner shop is now a cafe. Yet something lingers, an undercurrent known only to those who remember. The city carries its past quietly, layered and unresolved in places most people never see. Cold cases everywhere take on new resonance. Other families call, asking how it happened, what it felt like, whether waiting is worth it. The answers are complicated. Yes and no. Persistence matters. So does luck. So does the willingness to reopen wounds in pursuit of truth. In training rooms and conference halls, the case is dissected without emotion. Slides appear. Timelines tighten. The narrative is distilled into best practices and cautionary notes. It is strange to see a life reduced to bullet points, but it is also how progress happens, how tomorrow's investigations improve. The suspect settles into his sentence, the days blending together. He files appeals. He argues procedure. He tests the system that has finally closed around him. The system responds predictably, methodically. The past no longer bends for him. It stands firm. And yet, even with a verdict, even with a sentence, the story resists finality. Because the echo of that unanswered phone still rings somewhere in the collective memory. Because the rain still falls on quiet streets. Because time, for all its power, does not erase the questions that remain once justice has spoken. The cold case has been cracked, officially, decisively. The killer has been identified, named, contained. But the mystery leaves a residue, a reminder etched into the city's subconscious that some truths arrive late, and when they do, they change the shape of the present as much as they illuminate the past. The story doesn't end when the courthouse doors swing shut. It doesn't end when the cameras pack up and the headlines shrink into yesterday's feed, because a case like this leaves behind a wake. Paper, people, and quiet corners of the city that suddenly feel different, as if London itself has turned its head to look at what it lived through and never fully understood. The word justice gets used a lot in the days after sentencing, printed in bold, spoken into microphones, repeated until it starts to sound like a password. But inside the homes that carried the weight for decades, justice isn't a clean finish. It's a door that finally closes after years of draft, and the silence on the other side is not peaceful. It's unfamiliar, almost alarming. Like waking up after a long illness and realizing you don't remember what normal feels like. The family tries to breathe again, and the first thing they notice is how breathing can hurt when you've spent years holding your lungs tight. They wake up and reach for their phones out of habit, not because they expect to call now, but because hope trained them into reflex. They sit at tables where a chair stayed empty so long it became part of the furniture, a ghost-shaped space no one dared remove, because removing it felt like surrender. Now the chair is still empty, but the reason has shifted, the uncertainty replaced by a certainty that is heavier in a different way, certainty with a name attached to it, certainty that doesn't let the mind wander into fantasies of a knock on the door, a mistaken identity, a miracle. Certainty is not mercy. Certainty is an ending that forces the heart to accept what it avoided accepting for too long. And the city that kept moving while the family stood still, starts offering them small, strange reminders that time never paused. New buildings, new faces, new slang, new technology, new seasons piled on the same streets. They walk past a corner where posters once flapped in the wind, and there's nothing there now, nothing to show that a woman's face once stared from that pole, asking strangers to notice her existence, asking them to care. A cafe has replaced an old shop, bright signage over glass windows, people laughing inside, unaware they're drinking coffee on top of a memory. That's what London does. It absorbs. It layers. It hides trauma under fresh paint and new leases. And unless you know where to look, you'd never guess what lies underneath. Inside the police station, another kind of waking begins. The case file, once a sleeping animal in a drawer, is now a trophy and a warning at the same time. Success invites questions. How did this take so long? What was missed? Could it have been solved earlier? Could she have been saved? Those questions cut deeper than any criticism because they come from within. Detectives don't celebrate for long. They debrief. They dissect. They try to make sense of the gap between 2001 and now, the long corridor of years where a killer lived freely while a family lived in limbo. They pull the early decisions back into the light, the choices made under pressure when information was thin and noise was thick. They talk about the limits of the era, CCTV that couldn't give a clear face, databases that didn't speak to each other, lab backlogs that meant time passed while evidence waited. They talk about the witness statements that weren't followed aggressively enough, the leads that felt promising but went nowhere, the suspects they eliminated too quickly or too late. They talk about the way a city can swallow a crime and keep walking, because London doesn't give you open roads and empty skies. It gives you crowds. It gives you corners. It gives you anonymity so dense it becomes a cloak. And the cold case unit, those people who live in the long shadows of other people's tragedies, feels the ripple immediately. Calls come in, emails, letters written in tight handwriting by families who have waited years for the same miracle. They ask about the DNA. They ask about the process. They ask what it feels like to finally hear a name. They ask, in polite, exhausted language, if waiting is worth it. The answer is never simple. Because this case proved something powerful and cruel at once. That time can hide the truth, but it can also preserve it, and whether you find it depends on science and persistence, and a moment of alignment you can't manufacture on demand. The media, meanwhile, does what it always does. It tries to turn complexity into a narrative that fits in a paragraph. They call it a breakthrough. They call it new evidence. They call it advances in DNA. But behind those clean phrases are years of quiet work, human error, human endurance, and the slow grind of systems trying to catch up with what they failed to do the first time. Some outlets chase the sensational angle, digging into the suspect's past, pulling old photographs, interviewing neighbors who say the same stunned line on loop. He seemed normal. That line is both true and useless. Normal is not innocence. Normal is camouflage. Neighbors start scanning their own memories like security footage. They remember the way he walked his dog, the way he spoke over the fence, the time he fixed a car late at night. They turn ordinary moments into potential warnings, trying to find the moment they should have noticed something, the moment they could have intervened. But the truth is colder than guilt. Most killers do not look like monsters. Most killers look like people. That is the most terrifying part for the community. Not that one of them did it, but that one of them did it while wearing the same face everyone else wore. The victim's name returns to the air in a new tone. Not missing, not mysterious, not vanished. Now it comes with the words, finally, after decades, at last. And yet, the family learns quickly that at last is not a cure. It is a checkpoint. Grief doesn't end when a case ends. Grief is not a file that gets archived. Grief is a presence that changes shape but never leaves completely. And in the weeks after conviction, grief can feel sharper because it no longer has to compete with hope. Hope was a buffer. Hope was a distraction. Hope was a job, something to do. Without it, the mind has more room to feel everything it postponed. They hold a private memorial, small, controlled, no cameras, because they refuse to let strangers own this moment too. They speak her name without qualifiers. Not victim, not case, not cold case headline. Just her name. They tell stories that never made the news. The way she laughed at her own jokes. The way she folded letters. The music she loved. The plans she made. They reconstruct her not as a tragedy, but as a person, and that reconstruction matters more than any verdict. And still, there are questions that refuse to die, the ones people whisper when the room empties and the microphones are gone. Did he act alone? Was there someone who helped, even indirectly? Was there a friend who noticed something and said nothing? A relative who sensed a shift and chose denial? An employer who ignored a pattern? The police cannot always answer those questions publicly, and sometimes they cannot answer them at all. Because a conviction does not illuminate every corner. It illuminates enough. The rest remains shadow, and humans hate shadow. Humans want the story to be complete. Investigators quietly check for connections, other missing women, other unsolved attacks, other patterns buried in old reports, because solving one cold case sometimes opens the door to others. They compare dates, locations, behaviors. They run analyses. They revisit closed doors with new keys. Most of it leads nowhere, but they have learned that nowhere is still information. It narrows the world. It sharpens the truth. And if there is another door to open, they want to open it now, before time builds another wall. The suspect's appeal process begins like a slow, predictable tide. Paper arguments, legal language, attempts to pull the case back into uncertainty. For the family, this is torture dressed in procedure. They thought the ending had arrived, and now the story is trying to restart. Their lawyers explain what is normal, what is unlikely, what is standard. The family listens, nods, tries to trust the system that once left them waiting. Trust is difficult when history taught you to expect delays. Meanwhile, strangers send messages, some supportive, some cruel, some invasive. People who watched a headline unfold decide they deserve a piece of the pain, and that entitlement is its own kind of violation. The family learns to protect themselves, to keep their grief behind walls again, not because the truth is hidden now, but because privacy becomes sacred when the world tries to consume your tragedy as content. And then, in quiet moments, the real aftermath reveals itself. The way the community speaks about safety now, more cautious, more aware that the familiar can be dangerous. The way older residents glance longer at unfamiliar cars. The way younger people learn, for the first time, that cold case doesn't mean old story. It means unfinished. It means someone got away with it for a long time. The city is forced to accept a disturbing fact. The past is not past. It is a layer beneath your feet, capable of rising without warning. The cold case was cracked. Yes. The killer identified. Yes. But the story leaves behind a psychological stain, a reminder that time is not justice and silence is not peace. London keeps moving, because London always moves. But somewhere on a wet street under a street lamp that no longer flickers, the memory of that night remains, quiet, persistent, like the echo of a phone ringing in an empty kitchen, unanswered, relentless, reminding anyone who listens closely that some mysteries don't end when they are solved. They end when the people left behind find a way to live with the truth. There is a particular kind of quiet that follows a verdict, a quiet that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the city has exhaled and then realized it doesn't know what to do with the air in its lungs. Because for years the story was a question, and questions keep you moving. They give you something to chase, something to argue about, something to imagine, and now the question has been pinned down, labeled, locked behind a number, behind a sentence, behind a system that insists the word resolved means the same thing to everyone. But resolution, on the street, in homes, in bodies, behaves differently. It lingers. It echoes. It rearranges the way people look at each other. The family learns this first, in the smallest moments, in the days when no one is calling for interviews anymore, when the flowers have wilted, when friends stop checking in as often because the world assumes the hard part is over, and the family is left alone with the truth, like a heavy object placed in the center of the room. They try to name what they feel, and it slips away from language. Relief is there, yes, but it is thin, edged with exhaustion. Anger is there, but it is old, worn down by time. Grief is there, unchanged, a constant baseline that never left, only shifted behind hope and effort and the discipline of waiting. Now, with waiting finished, grief walks forward into the open. They find themselves replaying the same thought at odd hours. If this evidence existed all along, if it only needed the right technology, the right database, the right person to notice the right inconsistency, then what exactly were the years in between? Were they necessary? Were they waste? Were they the price of living in an era that could not see what the future would see? The mind circles these questions like a moth around a lamp, drawn to heat it cannot touch without burning. In the police station, the case becomes something else, a success story and a scar. Senior officers stand in front of screens at conferences, explaining the investigative steps with controlled pride, pointing to the DNA advances, the database hit, the careful rebuild of the timeline. They talk about persistence, about method, about patience. The room nods, taking notes, hungry for replicable lessons. But the detectives who lived inside the case know what the slides cannot show. The months when the file sat untouched because resources were pulled to fresh emergencies. The years when hope was a phone call that never came. The moment when the smallest new detail finally made the whole picture tilt. Other families hear the story and their hearts surge, because hope is contagious. Cold case units across the country receive messages that read like prayers disguised as emails. Could this work for us? Can you test again? Can you look again? The system is not built to satisfy every hope at once. Backlogs swell, budgets strain, and still, the calls keep coming, because once a cold case is cracked in public, the world suddenly remembers how many are still frozen. The media shifts from shock to analysis, asking not only who, but how. They dig into procedural history. They find moments when the investigation pivoted. They look for human error, because human error makes a better story than time and probability. They speculate about missed opportunities. They hint at negligence without proving it. They imply there must be a villain besides the convicted man, someone who failed, someone who ignored, someone who could have stopped it sooner. The public consumes these narratives because they offer emotional clarity, but clarity is not accuracy. The truth is usually messier. Limitations, imperfect systems, a city too large, a killer too careful, a world not yet equipped to read the evidence it was collecting. And then the appeals begin to cast their long shadow, the predictable next act that no one wanted to acknowledge too soon. The defense files motions in language that sounds clinical but feels predatory to the family. Procedural error, unreliable testimony, prejudicial media coverage, forensic limitations. Each phrase is a lever trying to pry the case back open. The family is told to expect this, to understand it as part of the process. Knowing it is normal does not make it less brutal. It feels like someone insisting you relive the worst years of your life because the paperwork demands it. The suspect, now a convicted man, becomes a presence again not through his body but through documents, arguments typed, signatures, citations of precedent. He maintains the same posture he showed in court, controlled, calculated, refusing to give the world the satisfaction of visible collapse. That control is a kind of message. It says he still believes he can shape outcomes. It says he is not finished fighting. It says the story might still be tugged in another direction if the right crack can be found. For detectives, the appeals mean returning to the case one more time, combing transcripts, rechecking evidence logs, ensuring every chain of custody is intact. This is the part that rarely appears in headlines, the tedious back-end labor that keeps justice from unraveling. They do it with grim determination because they know how fragile public confidence can be. A conviction overturned on technical grounds would not only devastate a family, it would poison the belief that cold cases can ever truly be solved. But while the legal machine turns, another quieter machine turns alongside it, the machine of pattern recognition. Investigators begin to ask a question that haunts every late-solved case. Was this the only one? The suspect lived free for years. The city offered opportunity. The methods, the geography, the psychology, do they appear elsewhere in the archives? They pull other unsolved cases, other disappearances, other assaults that never became headlines. They don't announce what they're doing because they don't want to promise what they can't deliver. They simply look. They compare dates. They compare routes. They compare locations where bodies were found or not found. They compare witness descriptions that sound too similar to ignore. An unremarkable car, a man who blended into crowds, a moment of unease dismissed because it seemed too small at the time. Most comparisons lead nowhere. That is normal, but a few align just enough to keep the detectives awake. A file is reopened quietly, then another. The city has a way of producing coincidences, but detectives do not survive by believing in coincidence. They survive by proving it. They request old evidence to be retested where possible, pulling sealed bags from storage, the same careful ritual repeated with new labels. Sometimes the evidence is too degraded. Sometimes it was never collected. Sometimes it was collected but not preserved well enough to matter now. These are the moments that sting, the moments when time is not just an obstacle but an executioner of possibility. The family hears whispers about this secondary review, and it stirs a complicated feeling. If there were others, then their loved one was not only taken, she was part of a larger darkness. That thought is sickening. But if there were others, then solving her case could help them too. It could become a torch in a corridor of locked doors. That thought is the only thing that makes the sickness bearable. In the neighborhood, small social tremors appear. People begin to reframe the past, telling stories with a new edge. I always thought something was off. He gave me a strange look once. He used to take walks at odd hours. These statements multiply after the fact because humans crave the illusion of foresight. No one wants to admit they lived beside danger and never saw it. The mind edits memory to protect pride and sanity. The truth is simpler and more terrifying. You often can't tell. You often won't know until it's too late. Community meetings are held, half about safety and half about reassurance. Police representatives speak about vigilance, about reporting suspicious behavior, about the value of CCTV and street lighting, and neighbors looking out for each other. The audience listens, nodding, wanting control. But control is not guaranteed. The city is too big. People are too complex. And the most dangerous individuals are often the ones who understand exactly how much normalcy is required to be ignored. For the family, closure becomes a daily practice rather than a single moment. They are offered counseling. They accept, reluctantly at first, because they have spent so long being strong in public that vulnerability feels like a betrayal of the person they lost. But strength, they learn, is not only endurance. Strength is also letting the body stop bracing for impact after the impact has already happened. They visit places they avoided for years, the street where she was last seen, the station she used, the stretch of pavement that used to feel ordinary. The places look smaller than memory. That's another trick of time. The mind enlarges trauma until it fills landscapes. Standing there now, they feel the past press close, not as a movie playing back, but as a physical sensation, a tightening in the chest, a coldness in the hands. They realized the city did not hold their grief. They did. The city simply kept moving around it. And then, somewhere in the legal process, a hearing date is set for an appeal argument. The family is notified. Their stomachs drop. The detective who calls chooses his words carefully, offering reassurance without promising certainty. The system will do what it does. The case is strong. The evidence is solid. But nothing is guaranteed until the final stamp lands. The night before the hearing, the family barely sleeps. The mind returns to that first unanswered ring, that first empty kitchen, that first dreadful silence, as if time is folding in on itself. This is what a cold case does, even when solved. It teaches you that the past can re-enter the present without knocking. It teaches you that certainty is not a permanent state. It is something defended. Morning comes gray and sharp. They dress, they gather, they move toward the courthouse again, not for justice this time, but to guard what justice has already declared. The city flows around them, indifferent as always. But inside their small orbit, everything is still loud, still tense, still vibrating with the same ancient question, not who, not anymore, but will it hold? The courthouse feels colder the second time, not because the heat is lower, but because everyone now understands what's at stake, and the stakes are no longer theoretical. The family walks through the same doors they walked through for the verdict, yet the air tastes different, sharper, as if the building itself remembers how close the case came to dying quietly in a box, how much effort it took to drag it back into light, and how easy it would be for procedure to smother it again. They sit in the same rows, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanch, and they stare at the same polished wood and the same blank walls, trying not to think about the years when this room was only an idea, a hope, a fantasy that justice might someday have an address. The appeal is not a retrial, the lawyers remind everyone, and yet it feels like one because the defense doesn't need to prove innocence. It only needs to carve doubt into the structure the prosecution built, find a crack in the timeline, a weakness in the chain of custody, a moment when a detective wrote the wrong thing down or a lab technician signed the wrong line, and the entire architecture could shift. The judge enters. People rise, sit, breathe, and then the language begins. Legal terms like scalpels, precise and clinical, cutting away emotion as if emotion is contamination. The defense stands first, voice steady, confident in the cold power of process. They talk about fresh evidence in the sense of procedure, not biology, fresh arguments, fresh angles. They mention the length of time between crime and prosecution as if time itself is a defendant. They question whether witness recollections should have been admitted, whether media attention could have influenced testimony, whether the jury understood the DNA evidence properly, whether the new techniques were explained in a way that was fair and balanced. They sound reasonable. That is their weapon. Reasonableness is persuasive, especially to people who were not there for the years of silence. The prosecution responds with equal restraint, refusing theatrics, because drama is what gets overturned. They speak about safeguards, about cross-examination that happened in plain view, about expert testimony that was transparent about limitations, about probabilities explained without exaggeration. They remind the court that time did not create the evidence, it preserved it, and the delay was not an argument against truth, it was the tragedy of a system catching up to the crime. They argue that the jury did what it was meant to do: listen, weigh, decide. The family hears all of it like noise underwater. They don't want to understand the nuance. Nuance has stolen too much time already. They want finality, and finality in law is a slow thing, built from clauses and precedent and careful steps. Their bodies remember the old waiting. Their minds drift to the simplest fear, that after everything, after the name was spoken, after the verdict was read, the case could be pushed back into uncertainty like a door quietly closing again. A detective sits behind them, not in uniform, just a man with tired eyes and a posture carved by years of hard rooms. He watches the defense closely, the way you watch someone handling a fragile object. He knows the weak points because he has lived with them. He knows which questions will sting, which will slide off. He is not afraid of truth. He is afraid of paperwork. He is afraid of a technicality sharp enough to cut through decades of work. The judge listens without reacting, taking notes, asking questions that land like stones dropped into still water. The questions are not hostile. They are careful. They probe at the heart of the appeal. Did the process protect fairness? Did the evidence speak for itself? Did the jury have the tools to understand it? Did the state meet its burden? Each question forces the room to confront an uncomfortable reality. Justice isn't only about what happened. It's about whether the system can prove what happened in a way that survives inspection. Hours pass. The courtroom air thickens. The family's throats dry. When a brief recess is called, they step into a corridor where the walls seem too close, where strangers pass without recognizing the seismic moment happening inside. A vending machine hums. A cleaner pushes a cart. Life continues in the background of their crisis, indifferent, routine, and the contrast is almost unbearable. They call no one. They say little. The only conversation that matters is happening behind a door they cannot control. When proceedings resume, the defense makes one more attempt to undermine the forensic spine, framing modern DNA techniques as powerful but potentially misleading, emphasizing that probability is not certainty and that laboratory practices, over long periods, can be vulnerable. They suggest contamination like a ghost, never fully embodied, always present in implication. The prosecution answers with documentation, logs, chain of custody, quality controls, independent confirmation, the careful redundancy of science built to withstand suspicion. The judge asks about the storage conditions, the handling protocols, the validation of methods. The expert answers with calm exactness, refusing the trap of overconfidence. The hearing ends without a decision. Of course it does. Courts do not deliver verdicts in a breath. The judge will reserve judgment. The phrase lands like a sentence of its own. Reserved. Delayed. Waiting again. The family exits the building into daylight that feels wrong, as if the sky should have the decency to mirror their dread. Cameras hover at a respectful distance, and then close in anyway. Microphones appear. The family declines. There is nothing they can say that will make this better. There is no quote that will hold the case in place. Days stretch, then weeks. The appeal decision becomes a date on a calendar that no one can stop staring at. The family experiences time like a thread again, each morning a new iteration of the same fear, that certainty is temporary. They replay the trial in their minds, the evidence, the expert's voice, the jury's return. They picture the convicted man sitting in a cell, filing papers, still pushing, still trying to move the world in his favor. The idea that he can still reach them through ink and procedure feels like a second violation. The detectives, meanwhile, do what they know how to do when time threatens. They fortify. They recheck everything. They revisit the evidence storage records. They confirm lab accreditation. They request additional review, not because it's needed, but because it is armor. In the background, another lab runs a supplementary analysis on retained material, an extra layer designed to slam a door that the defense keeps trying to pry open. It is meticulous, quiet work. It doesn't make headlines, but it matters. And then, in the middle of this legal suspense, something unexpected happens. Another investigative thread tightens. The secondary review of similar cases, the quiet pattern search running in parallel, returns a result that is not a full explosion but a strong flare. A partial correspondence in a separate, older incident file, one that was never solved and never publicized the same way. It is not enough to file charges. It is enough to force attention. It is enough to remind everyone that the story may still be larger than a single verdict. The cold case unit moves carefully, aware of optics, aware of the danger of appearing to chase ghosts. They treat the new hit as a lead, nothing more, but the implications ripple outward. If the convicted man is tied to another event, it strengthens the narrative of pattern, not as character assassination, but as context of behavior. It becomes another weight on the scale, another reason the appeal should fail, another reason the verdict should stand. The detectives don't leak it. They don't want spectacle, but the knowledge sits in their minds like a loaded detail, waiting to be used if needed. When the appeal decision finally arrives, it arrives the way all modern dread arrives, through a phone call that makes the heart hammer before a single word is spoken. The family gathers again, not in a courtroom at first, but in a living room with curtains half drawn, as if light itself might be intrusive. A detective is present, a victim advocate. They speak slowly. They choose words with care. The court has ruled. The appeal is denied. The sentence remains. The conviction stands. The room doesn't erupt. It doesn't collapse. It simply exhales. The family's shoulders drop in unison, as if they have been holding up a roof for years and someone has finally taken the weight. Tears come again, quieter this time, not the sharp tears of a verdict, but the soft, exhausted tears of a door locking for good. They are not happy. Happiness died a long time ago in this story, but they are steadier. The ground beneath them feels less likely to shift. Outside, the news runs the update quickly. Appeal dismissed. Cold case conviction upheld. The public consumes it in seconds. The world moves on. But for the people inside the case, this is the moment that finally turns resolution into something durable. It is not peace, not closure in the mythic sense, but a stabilization. A line drawn in ink that doesn't smear when touched. And yet, even with the appeal denied, the case leaves behind that final, stubborn residue. The awareness of how close it came to never being solved at all. The family knows the truth now, but they also know the truth waited for science, for databases, for someone to look at the right note with the right eyes. That knowledge changes how they see time. Time is not a healer. Time is a container. It holds secrets until the world is ready to open them. Sometimes the world never becomes ready. This time it did. London keeps moving, as it always does. Sirens in the distance, footsteps on wet pavement, trains carving through the night. Yet somewhere beneath that motion lies the memory of a phone ringing in an empty kitchen, unanswered, relentless, and the understanding that even when a cold case is cracked, the echo does not vanish. It just becomes part of the city's permanent soundtrack, a warning stitched into the background noise. The past can wait, but it never truly goes away. The denial of the appeal doesn't sound like a celebration when it reaches the family. It sounds like a lock turning in a door that has been rattling for far too long. And the first thing they notice after the news lands is not joy, not triumph, but the strange absence of imminent threat. The way the room seems to expand by a few inches because their bodies are no longer braced for the floor to shift. They sit with it for a moment in silence, letting the words sink into places words rarely reach. And then the exhaustion arrives. Real, physical, undeniable. Because for decades their nervous systems have been trained to expect another twist, another delay, another not yet. And now there is no more procedural cliffhanger, no more legal suspense hanging over their heads like a blade, just the fact of it. Solid and unmovable, a truth that cannot be appealed away. Outside, London receives it the way London receives everything. Quickly, briefly, and then with a shrug of motion. A headline flashes, a ticker scrolls, someone reads it on a phone while stepping onto a train, their eyes flicking up only long enough to register the words cold case and conviction upheld before the next message arrives, the next distraction, the next life. The city does not stop for one family's closure, because if it did, it would never move at all. London is built on layers of stories, most of them unresolved in some private way, and the pavement is patient enough to carry them all. But in the small orbit of people who lived inside this case, the atmosphere changes. Detectives who once measured time in leads and lab results now measure it in absence. The absence of the case's pull, the absence of that constant mental itch that used to flare whenever they heard the victim's name. They return to work the next day and find themselves reaching for a file that is no longer theirs to chase. It's strange, like a limb that's been kept tense for years suddenly relaxing and then realizing it doesn't know how to rest. They talk about it quietly in hallways and break rooms, not with victory, but with that sober, almost reverent tone people use when they've survived something. They know what it cost. They know how close the truth came to never being spoken. And because they know that, they do something that doesn't make news. They preserve it. They document every step, every decision, every correction that made the difference between a dead end and an arrest. And they turn the story into a blueprint, not for glory, but for the next file that sits on a shelf waiting for a future that may or may not arrive. They write internal memos about the value of revisiting witness statements with new questions, about the importance of evidence storage integrity, about how a single overlooked note can become the hinge of a case decades later. They turn pain into practice, because that is how the system learns, if it learns at all. The family, meanwhile, experiences a quieter, more intimate aftermath, one that no camera could capture even if it tried. They wake up on mornings that used to feel heavy with impending news, and now the heaviness is different, less jagged, more like a permanent weather system. They find themselves revisiting ordinary objects, the coat hook, the kitchen counter, an old mug, things that once carried the unbearable weight of maybe, and now carry the weight of never again. They begin to allow themselves to speak in past tense without flinching, and that shift is both a relief and a wound, because hope kept the language alive in an unnatural way, a grammatical refusal to let go. They go through boxes again, not searching for clues now, but searching for her, the person behind the headlines, behind the courtroom, behind the sterile phrase, victim. Photographs are held longer. Handwriting is traced with fingertips. Stories are told that have nothing to do with the crime. They remember the kind of laugh she had, the song she played too loud, the way she took her tea, the way she hugged people like she meant it. These details feel like rebellion against the case file, against the reduction of a life to an incident. They reclaim her in fragments, and the fragments stitch together into something warmer than any legal victory. Sometimes, in the evenings, they drive through parts of the city they avoided for years. They pass the street where she was last known to be safe. They pass the corner where the posters once clung to metal poles. They pass the places that became symbols, and they discover that symbols are smaller in real life than they are in memory. The street is just a street. The corner is just a corner. Yet the body remembers. The heart speeds up anyway. The hands tighten on the steering wheel anyway. Trauma doesn't care that the case is closed. Trauma keeps its own archives. Community talk shifts too. At first, there is relief, an exhale shared across neighbors who never knew what to do with the story, but carried it like an urban legend with teeth. People tell each other that the system worked, eventually, that justice came, that technology has changed everything, and there's comfort in that, the comfort of believing the world is predictable. But underneath, there's another feeling that doesn't get said aloud as often, unease. Because the truth of this case isn't only that the killer was found. The truth is that he lived among them for years, ordinary enough to be ignored, and that reality makes normal life feel slightly thinner, slightly less trustworthy. People look at their streets differently. They listen differently at night. They glance longer at cars that idle too long. The city's noise seems to contain more meaning than it used to. And then there are the other families, ones whose cases are still cold, still silent, still unresolved, watching this story like a flare in darkness. Some of them feel hope, sharp and painful, because if this could happen, maybe theirs can too. Others feel anger, because hope is a cruel gift when it arrives with the reminder of how long waiting can last. They ask questions in forums and support groups. They contact cold case units. They bring new pressure to old files. The system strains under this new wave of expectation, because it can't deliver miracles on demand, but it tries, and sometimes trying is the only ethical response to grief that refuses to die quietly. In the background, investigators continue their quiet pattern checks, the ones that started before the appeal hearing and never really stopped. They compare the convicted man's known history to other events, not because they want to expand the story, but because they cannot ethically ignore the possibility that there are other victims whose names never reached headlines. Most leads end in nothing. A few remain open questions. The detectives understand a hard truth. Even when one cold case is cracked, the city still has other frozen rooms behind other locked doors, and not every key will be found in time. Eventually, the case becomes what all solved cases become, a lesson, a reference point, a story told in training sessions and articles about forensic breakthroughs. People will describe it with clean, satisfying language, killer identified, case solved, justice served, because humans like endings that feel complete. But those who lived it know the ending is not clean. The ending is a scar. The ending is a timeline with a missing middle, decades of life swallowed by uncertainty. The ending is the knowledge that truth is sometimes an accident of timing, that if technology had arrived later, if a witness had moved sooner, if an evidence bag had been mishandled, the story might still be unsolved, still haunting, still cold. And that is the final, lingering chill of this case, the part that stays after the gavel and the headlines and the appeal decision. The awareness of contingency, of how fragile resolution is, of how easily a life can be erased by a moment and then left suspended in question marks for years. The family does not get their time back. The detectives do not get to erase the years of frustration. The community does not get to return to innocence. What they get is truth, late, heavy, irreversible. And the truth is both gift and burden. On some nights, long after the news cycle has forgotten, the family sits in their kitchen with the lights low, and the ordinary sounds of the house feel louder than they used to. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant rush of traffic, a neighbor's footsteps on the pavement outside, the city's heartbeat, constant and indifferent. They think about that first night again, the early hours when everything changed without announcing itself, when the absence was the only clue, when the future was still unwritten and hope had not yet learned the shape of disappointment. They imagine the phone ringing into silence, unanswered, relentless, and they understand now that the ringing wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of a long echo that would run through years, through systems, through strangers' conversations, until science and persistence finally turned the sound into a name. London keeps moving. It always will. Rain still beads on windows. Street lamps still cast pale circles on wet pavement. People still hurry past corners without knowing what happened there once. But somewhere beneath the motion, the city carries this story as a permanent undertone, a reminder that the past can wait longer than anyone expects, that silence is never proof of safety, and that sometimes, decades later, when everyone assumes the cold has set in for good, the case cracks open, not with drama, not with fireworks, but with a quiet, undeniable click, like a lock finally turning, like a door finally closing, leaving behind not peace, but something closer to truth and the weight of what truth costs.